monthly meeting of Save Our Water Lake Eufaula here at the high school. I'm glad that each of you came out for this meeting tonight. Good. We have a great program scheduled. We have lots to share with you. Before we get going with our program, I have asked Jim Zellner from our Legislative Committee if he will come and do presentation of the flag. May we all stand?
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in pledging allegiance to the flag of our country. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. I just jumped in there just making an assumption that everyone knew who I was. Are there people here who've never been to a Save Our Water meeting before? Well, all right, welcome. You're some of the most important people here this evening. My name is Karen Weldon, and I am the chairperson of Save Our Water Lake Eufaula Citizens Group. And I apologize for not introducing myself before I just jumped in there. We also do an invocation at the beginning of our meetings each month. And I am going to lead us in the invocation this month. So if you would, join me in the invocation. And let us pray. Most merciful God, we pray for the people of the world to seek peace in all of our relationships. Especially let us pray that we may be moved to pray for one another when we are at odds in our thinking, in our needs, and in our wants. May we be reconciled to all people and nations, some of whom we have ignored in the past, some who we have treated with disdain and dishonor. May we recognize our part in broken relationships and promises, yet know that in your mercy you forgive us, even as we forgive others of their real or imagined transgressions against us. Help us to remember that you are the only true power that exists. All other power is only imagined and temporary. It is only influence and energy that is lent to us to try and help one another establish a better world in which to live, and to be good stewards of the resources you have so generously given to us. Forgive us when we abuse this power. We continue to pray for the hope that leads us to trust you, to guide us to make wise choices, to know how to lead your people, and to respect the earth and the waters. Guide us to be peacemakers as we strive for reconciliation and love in our homes, workplaces, schools, communities, and political lives. Show us the way to move beyond the fear of retaliation to mediation and conversation with all people. May we know that the whole world is in your hands and that you have power beyond all that we can imagine, which you offer us through your Spirit. Help us to use that power wisely and according to your will. Whether we are defending our families and nation against real or imagined threats, seeking to influence others to work toward a world of peace, or protecting the future of our communities. Praise and love to you, O God, creator of the heavens and the earth and all that is in them. Amen. I've asked the City of Eufaula's Mayor, Dean Smith, if he will come and welcome you again this evening. Mayor?
Thank you, Karen, as always. I really do always appreciate the partnership that we've had with this group since the very beginning. Karen, you and your group has worked so successfully to achieve a lot of things. I found myself last night actually standing up and listening to What Thunder. And that was really enjoyable. On behalf of the City of Eufaula and myself as the mayor, I'd like to welcome everyone here. Well, I noticed we had some guests tonight that hadn't been here. I would also like to take an opportunity to thank the people from the Corps We met with them, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago. I lose track of time. We had a very good meeting, I felt like. Had some good messages. It was very interesting, the complexity of the issue that we have before us. But I do think that we have some individuals here that have some things to offer to work towards the common goal, is that better management of the lake. And I'm sure we'll get to that later on. But as always, I would just like to welcome everyone here to the Gentle Giant, as it's called, Lake Eufaula. And hopefully we'll all be able to enjoy another beautiful summer like we've grown to just to kind of expect here. We've just all kind of grown up here expecting, that the water was going to be there. And I think it's kind of caught us off guard when this water, is low. But I think that if we're real fortunate and we get the rain that we need, the Corps is going to help us in managing the water, I think, in a better, proper way than they have. I really do think they're listening. So, like I said, I'd like to say thank you for you guys showing up. And on behalf of the city of Eufaula, welcome to Eufaula.
Thank you, Mayor Smith. Some of the feedback that I've gotten the last few months is that our introductions take way too long in our meetings. So again, after several months, I finally heard that feedback, and so I'm going to try and shorten the introductions and get on with the program. So what I'm going to do tonight is simply ask that if there are elected officials in our audience tonight, would you simply stand so we can greet you accordingly? Or if you're representing an elected official, stand and let us welcome you. The list is short tonight. All right. Welcome, Blake. Mr. Martin is representing Congressman Boren's office this evening. Appreciate that. As you can see, we have guests up here on the podium, and I'm going to be introducing them in just a few minutes, but they're representatives from the Tulsa District Office of the Corps of Engineers, and if it's okay with them, I want to save the introductions for that part of the program, but we're certainly very honored and appreciative of you being here this evening, and I want to introduce each of you individually when we come to that part of the program, if that's okay with you. We do have some announcements that I want to make this evening, and is Karen Sminner here? I can make those, but I also would like her to come up and do that herself if she would. Karen Sminner is our volunteer coordinator and fundraising coordinator, and she is really the worker behind the scenes that makes a lot of things come together and happen with us and works with our volunteers and our events. And so Karen has some announcements that she would like to make. Karen?
Again, we have to thank all of the volunteers that help us in each and every one of the tasks that we ask of you. Yesterday when we went to Oklahoma City to do our lobbying, it was just thrilling to see how many of you showed up and how many of you were willing to wear our t-shirts, and they made an impression. I heard one group as we went by, they said, "Why didn't we think of that? Look how nice they look. They're really making their point." And then I heard it again later in the day, and I thought that was really a compliment to what we did. I'm asking, our main project right now is for mayors of the developments. So if you're in a development and you don't have a representative to represent your development, please talk to the girls outside and sign up. We need you. And we're planning on having a potluck for all of the mayors and talk to you about the things that we want to accomplish in the future and how you can help us. So please sign up to be a mayor if you don't have, or we have a list of all the projects outside that do not have a mayor. So make sure that your development is not on that list. If it is, sign up. We also, if any of you are getting your newsletter, or this time your postcard, by mail, and you have an email address, please stop at the desk and let us have your email address. Those save us a lot of money. That way we can contact you and keep you more up to date on the things that are happening. And those are the things right now that are most important. We're going to be having several have our booth and the ATV at some of the weekend events. And if any of you want to help us with some of them, we're going to be at all the fishing tournaments. We're going to be at the burning of the socks at number 9 Marina on the 18th. And these should all prove to be fun events. If you're willing to help us with it, come talk to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. I can't stress enough how important it is that if you have an email address and you haven't given that to us to add your email address to our database, we really do urge you to do that. This has been a really active week that you're going to learn more about that as I go on and give reports of activities we've done during the month. Bob Buckner is going to be telling you more about what we've done as well. You're missing out on action that Save Our Water Lake Eufaula group is doing if you have an email address and you haven't given that to us. Right now is a really busy time, and we're sending out email alerts. We don't have time or the money to send out information through the mail, and we're doing legislative stuff. And we're sending out emails and alerting people of what's going on, and when we need you to send an email to the Capitol or to the legislators, and that's the only way we have to communicate right now. So please, if you want to be included, give us your email address. Also, out there on the table are our t-shirts, our buttons, our hats, and plenty of raffle tickets out there. So stop by the tables before you leave this evening. Also, one of the things that we want to be very supportive of is the Lake Eufaula Association. And they've asked tonight if we would make an announcement that they have brought their membership forms, and they're out on the table in the hallway too. And if you're not a member of the Lake Eufaula Association, we want to encourage you to consider picking up one of their brochures and consider joining and being a part of the Lake Eufaula Association as well. And remember what the three prizes are for the raffle that's going on right now. As you can see, the ATV is sitting out there. You saw that as you came in. Don't forget that the second prize is the one-year boat slip rental at number 9 Marina. And the third prize is a 3-day, 2-night trip to Branson. So go buy your tickets. It's for a good cause. Every month when I get ready and put this PowerPoint program together for our meetings, and I start summarizing what we've done in between the meetings, it makes me tired. I just can't believe what all we have done in 30 days. Since the 9th of February, which was our last meeting, I just want to show you real quickly what we've done. 5 days after our last meeting, some of us drove to Oklahoma City and attended the Oklahoma Water Resources Board meeting. This is a commitment that we made from the very beginning back in November when we were at the Episcopal Church, that we would have a presence at all of the monthly Oklahoma Water Resource Board meetings so that we would stay informed about the decisions that might be made there that might affect Lake Eufaula in any way. We did that on Valentine's Day. Whoops. 3 days after that, volunteers, or a couple of us, who ended up again back in Oklahoma City, and we met with the Secretary of Environment, Miles Tolbert, and with Secretary of State Susan Savage, and with the Executive Director of the Water Resources Board. And we sat there and had a discussion about Senator LeBlanc's bill, House Bill 1677, talking about the Citizens Lake Committee. However, we ended up pushing away from the table and deciding that wasn't exactly what we wanted, and we came home saying, no deal. That weekend, we turned around, and I don't know how many volunteers, Karen, 38? 27 volunteers that weekend ended up in Oklahoma City and at a booth at the Oklahoma Tackle and Fishing event. And some of us ended up getting iced in for the weekend. But we had an opportunity there to talk to people who came to the show. Even though it ended up being an icy weekend, there were 12,000 people who came through that show. And we got lots of letters that were signed for Senator Inhofe that Mr. McConkey probably got to see. Turned around, came back home, and we had an opportunity to go and speak to the Eufaula Indian community. They, in turn, ended up ordering 93 Save Our Water t-shirts. And so I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of t-shirts running around the community, which is great publicity and advertising for our group. A week later, on the 27th of February, we ended up having a workshop at the library on how to track Oklahoma legislation on the internet. And there were probably about a dozen or so of us who went through that workshop. And there was a woman, her name was Louisa Bowden. She was a legislative reference library from the Jan Eric Cartwright Memorial Library from the state capitol, who came down and facilitated that workshop for us. And I think it was a great experience for all of us, because we have legislation out there that we're trying to get passed at the Capitol. It's a great learning tool for many of us so that we can track the legislation. Very next day, on the 28th of February, Karen and I went to the FLEAS meeting. If you don't know what the FLEAS they are the Friendly Lake Eufaula Area Supporters. And every woman in the room ought to consider joining the FLEAS in this community. How many here belong to the FLEAS? Do we have any FLEAS? There's a hand back there in the back of the room. So we had a good time at the FLEAS meeting on the 28th. Later that same night, we attended the Corps of Engineers listening session in town. And you're going to hear more about that. I think John Roberts with the Corps is going to talk about that, so I won't steal his thunder in talking about the listening session. We turned right around. We did a campaign over the internet. On March 2nd, Bob Butner, who's on our legislative committee, drafted some emails, sent them out on the computer. We did our first email and telephone campaign on March 2nd, and we did it. We had a piece of legislation, and I'm not going to go too far into this because Bob's going to talk about our legislation, but we had a piece of legislation that we wanted moved from one committee to another, and through email and telephone, by golly, we did it. It got moved from the rules to the Environment Committee. March 3rd, there's some of us piled in our cars and drove to Hartshorn, had a meeting with Senator LeBlanc to talk about a bill that he has down there and what he might be able to do for us. And came home with a little bit of homework. Just this past Monday, there were 14 of us piled in our cars and drove south McAllister to Kiowa, and we toured the Kiowa power plant. And that was very helpful. There are a lot of rumors out there about the Kiowa power plant and what's going on down there, and it was very helpful to dispel some of the myths there. I could probably talk for a good 15 or 20 minutes about that experience. And would be glad maybe in the question and answer period if you have some questions about the Kiowa power plant. I think those of us who went on that tour would be glad to answer some questions, but that was very, very valuable. Wrong direction. And just yesterday, there were 22 of us who put on our Save Our Water t-shirts. We got up in the middle of the night. We met at Brahms. Some of us were from Oklahoma, some were from Oklahoma City who just met us at the Capitol, but those of us who lived here, we met at Brahms at 5:15 in the morning. And we went to Oklahoma City and lobbied the same bill earlier that we did the email and telephone campaign to get it from one committee to another. The next process of that bill was to get it out of the committee and onto the House floor. We went to Oklahoma City. We lobbied from 8 a.m. until 10, and our goal was to get that bill out onto the House floor, and we were successful. House Bill 2804. And Bob, I'm going to let you tell them what that's all about when you get to your bill tracking report. And there's a couple of pictures of us. I laughed. There are 22 of us that when there's a committee meeting in Oklahoma, at the Capitol, they have little rooms for it. There were so many of us, they had to move the committee meeting down into the House of Representatives chambers. And we laughed and said we didn't realize that it would be moved to the House floor so quickly. So, I mean, doesn't it make you tired, just the report and what all was accomplished by volunteers? That's volunteers working for Save Our Water and the events and what we've done in just a month's time. So, now, Bob Buckner is going to come. Bob is on the legislative committee, and while the legislative session is going on from now until the end of May, what we'll be including in your monthly meeting is a bill tracking report. And Bob's going to tell you about the legislation that affects us. So Bob, tell us about it.
Okay, once again, I can't overemphasize the importance of having those email addresses. If you're like me and you scribbled it so they couldn't read it when you first turned it in, try to fix that because it's so valuable. And all the guys at the House of Representatives knew who we were when we got there just because of those emails. And I think that really set this thing up for success. And we still got more work to do. And if you want to make that email right, we'll get it in there and we'll put you to work just by sending an email. Okay, we've got two bills in the state that are still alive. HB 2804 by Representative Mike Reynolds. And what that ended up with, it wasn't everything we had asked for, but politics is politics. And we ended up with a Citizens Lake Committee, much like the federal level that we expect to get. And the state is going to ask for a task force on to study hydropower. And there's more than this, but the main things they're going to do is assess the effects of hydropower on the state of Oklahoma and its environment, and also to try to arrive at something like a fuel equivalent value where someone uses water for something instead of fuel, like hydropower. Well, then Oklahoma should deserve some money for that. And we propose that money eventually be used to mitigate some of the problems that are caused by hydropower on these lakes. We envision something like fish habitat restoration, some of those plastic spiders, something like that. If it remains necessary to do that, we hope that with better lake management levels, we won't have that requirement. But if we need to help the fish, we hope to have some money to do that with. And like Karen said, we got that, first that bill was meant for sure death in the Rules Committee. We email campaign got that moved from the Rules to the Environment. And then another email campaign set it up for us to go to the Capitol and lobby that bill. And we got it moved out. So it's on the floor now to be considered next week, sometime probably between Wednesday and Friday. And we'll need to do another email campaign and telephone call campaign at that time. Now, this law is not limited to Lakeview Falls. It's limited to hydropower lakes. So if you have friends and family who live on other lakes that have hydropower, you ought to give them a heads up, have them visit our website and figure out how to help this deal, because Right now, we've got a big footprint around the lake and a big footprint in Oklahoma City, but all those Tulsa lakes have really not been exposed to what we've been doing here, and it's time to bring those guys on board. So make a few phone calls this week and let those people know what's going on, and that they can get good direction on how to help, and it'll help them as well. So that's something that could really be productive. Now, Senator LeBlanc, he was able to get a bill through the Senate, and it's already, I think, headed for the House of Representatives. And that bill was limited to a Citizens Lake Committee. And we met with him, and of course he had our position paper, but we met with him again to reemphasize some of those points that we thought were important in this bill. And he suggested that Representative Harrison, who's going to be the House co-author, could add whatever language we required. Senator LeBlanc is a personable guy, and one thing he said that was kind of interesting, he says, "I've got the gun for you boys, you guys just give me the bullets and we'll put her in there." So, you know, if that's true, we're going to give him some bullets and we'll see what happens. Now, there are other issues as far as water legislation on the state level that we're watching, concerned about. The governor has proposed somewhere between $2.2 and $2.5 million for the first part of a comprehensive water study. We've seen that amount of money has been appropriated to or proposed to be appropriated to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. They tried to develop legislation last year that would outline a statewide comprehensive study of what should be accomplished by that study. Due to politics, they couldn't settle on that legislation. It ended up getting so many amendments in it that nobody liked it. So they didn't have a plan. But what they're going to try to do, and we're not for this, they're going to try to go ahead and give that $2.5 million to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board and trust them to develop that plan. We're not comfortable with that. So we probably will oppose that legislation, and we may have an email campaign at some point in the future to try to stop that item of the appropriation bill. The way to do the appropriation bill is they've explained to us, they can't say we're going to give you this $2.5 million and you have to do this with it. The $2.5 million has to come on one hand, and then the instructions have to come in another bill. But we think they at least should come with a companion bill that outlines that study. So I'd say watch the website and watch your email for how we think we can handle that best. And that concludes my part.
Did y'all follow all that? It gets good. Some days I wonder if I do, but it gets complicated, but yeah, I'm just amazed. I'm just amazed at how far we've gotten since November 11th. You know, I think we're doing great. I'm terribly excited, and was yesterday when we came home from the Capitol. I think we've made a lot of progress in a very short period of time, and you know it's hard work, and the kinds of changes that we have to make for Lake Eufaula, and trying to help other lakes across the state has to be made legislatively, and it's hard work and it's tedious work, and it takes the collective effort of the people and the power of the people being behind the work. But I can't stress how important it is for your voice to be heard. If you ever think that it doesn't make any difference to make that email, to send that email, or to make that phone call, or to send that letter, you're mistaken. Because I am convinced after these campaigns that we're doing that it makes all the difference in the world for our legislators to hear from their constituents. So please, when you hear from us and we ask for you to send those emails or to make those telephone calls, please take the few minutes to do it. It makes a difference, and it's making a difference in what we're doing. Thanks, Bob. I keep going the wrong direction. Just a look ahead next month at our meeting. The second Thursday of April will be April 13th, and our speakers for next month will be Secretary of State Susan Savage and Secretary of Environment Miles Tolbert. And the reason that we invited Secretary of State Susan Savage in the first place, if you remember early on, we talked about Susan Savage had been on, when she was mayor in Tulsa, had been on the National Recreation Lake Study Commission in 1999. And I've been at the Capitol and sat down, and George and I did, George Ellison, and we had a conversation with her about her experience of being on that commission. And that's when we invited her down here to talk about the importance of recreation and the recommendations that came out of that study. And so Secretary Savage will be here next month to talk about her experience of that study and the recommendations. She also wanted us to invite Secretary of the Environment so that Miles Tolbert could talk about some of the issues coming out of his office. So I hope you'll be back in April to listen to what they have to say. Also, just wanted to remind you that from here on out for the rest of the year, we will be having voter registration application forms and our registration desk. So if you are not registered to vote, you can pick up a form here at our meetings. At this time, one of the things we do each month at our meetings is to take up a donation. We are a not-for-profit organization. We do have expenses. Every time we send out a meeting notice or send a message to you, it costs anywhere from $700 to $1,000. We have that many volunteers and people interested in Save Our Water. And so we need your help in donations. So before we move into the main part of our program, we are going to take up a donation. That's what you get for having a seminary student for the chairperson of your organization. I am practicing my skills at taking up offerings. So, here come the baskets. Dig deep. Take your right hand and dig deep into that pocket. And let's take up a donation for Save Our Water. The address on the screen is wrong. So if you're getting your checkbook, make it out to Save Our Water. But the post office box is now Post Office Box 63. I forgot to change that on the screen. And the quicker you dig deep, the quicker we can move on.
You're only 29. Come on. Really? Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that.
One thing I noticed when I got to the meeting is our treasurer had gone to the Dollar General store and bought bigger baskets. So I know she's optimistic. They're bigger and they're deeper. Someone just turned the light out on them. We appreciate your generosity.
How long did it take for it to wake up?
One other piece of news that I didn't put on the PowerPoint that was accomplished this month is while we were at the Capitol yesterday, we picked up the articles of incorporation, and we are Save Our Water, Inc. as of yesterday. So we are incorporated as an organization.
Great.
Okay. I believe that important mission is accomplished. And we're ready to move on. Now I want to introduce our special guest for this evening. The program tonight is a combination of talking not only to our legislative committee for Save Our Water, Lake Eufaula, but also talking with representatives of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I have the privilege of introducing to you several representatives from the Tulsa District Office. And not in any particular order here. They can wave their hands here. First off, I would like to introduce to you Mr. John Roberts. Mr. Roberts is the Deputy District Engineer for Project Management out of the Tulsa office. And Mr. Billy Banks. Mr. Banks is the Chief of Operations Division. And over here on the other side of the stage is Mr. Earl Groves. Mr. Groves is the Assistant Chief of Operations Division. And then we also have over here, Mr. Bailey, I don't know where your office is.
The old Weber's Falls Lake office for the Eastern Area office is located.
The old Weber's Falls office,
Just outside of Gore.
just outside of Gore. Mr. Bentley is the Eastern Area Manager. Welcome, Mr. Bentley. And also, Lori, can I introduce you? Lori Hunninghake is Administrative Officer. She's sitting down in the audience this evening. And Lori does an awful lot of the work. Kind of like Karen, yeah. Welcome, Lori. And also we have Mr. Ken McConkey, who is the Northeast Field representative out of Senator Inhofe's office, up here on stage as well. At this time, Mr. Roberts has a presentation that he would like to give about the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers project. I'll turn it over to Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Karen. Which one's the advance?
This one right here, and you go.
Usually they don't trust me with one of these because I'll do the runaway slides tricks. If it gets out of hand, I'll give it up. But I do appreciate the opportunity for us to come visit with you tonight. Your accomplishments are very impressive over a short period of time. And, I think y'all put together quite an impressive team. But kind of a short definition of a team is a group of individuals that come to and work together for a common cause. And I know that everybody here really has a common cause, and that is to make the great resource of Lake Eufaula to be the best it can be for all of the users that are out there. And I just want to tell you, we want to be part of that team too, because there's no one really cares about Lake Eufaula, the Corps of Engineers does. It's a Corps of Engineers project. We built it, we operate it, so we want to be part of the same team and assist and put changes that need to be made to make Eufaula even a more precious resource than it is today. Okay, Karen. That one?
That's what I think.
Daryl. I broke it already. I haven't been here 5 minutes.
We need some technological assistance. Okay, there.
Okay, there's just a short outline of what I'm going to talk about. I want to give you just a little bit of an overview of the Corps of Engineers so that you will understand this better and know a little bit more. I want to go through, we said we had a listening session on February 28th, and that's just what it was. That we want to become better listeners and better understanding of what all the issues are around the lake so we can address them. So I'm going to go through and try to cover some of the concerns that we heard and address those tonight, and then give you an update on the drop. A little bit about Tulsa District. And I'll go through this fairly fast, because I know that's not why you came here, but we are a part of the United States Army. As some people asked us about that the last couple of weeks. So we are a military organization. My boss is Colonel Nero Kirka, a colonel in the United States Army. He's an Army engineer from West Point. And although most of our employees are civilian, we're definitely part of the Army and serving these other missions that we have. And I was going to tell you, I love the Corps of Engineers. I've got 34 years of federal service, 32 of that with the Corps of Engineers, and I still love getting up every morning and coming and working for the Corps. And I guess when I don't get up in the morning and love coming to work every morning, I guess that's when I'll hang up my hat and retire. But I really love it. Between the 5 of us that are here, we probably got 140, 150 years of service with the Corps. And I guess that qualifies us to be bureaucrats. And I guess sometimes we can be that. We're not a perfect organization, but I want to tell you, we mean well, and we want to do what's in everybody's best interest. You can see the kind of area that we covered there. I just want to go through the missions. Our primary responsibility is supporting the military. And got a couple of slides on that. And I don't think since World War II, the Corps has been any more involved in supporting the military than we have since the war on terrorism that started with 9/11. We've had a lot of people deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, Homeland Security has become a major mission, working on the nation's infrastructure, which is what we were all about from over 200 years ago, and of course our environmental and water resource missions. I'm stuck again, here we go. Global war on terrorism. So we've had, out of our 650 employees, we've had nearly 70 deployed overseas. 8 employees currently deployed. And then we have such great technology, compared to the other nations, that, a lot of the engineering done is reach-back support. We're out in the field, they've got engineering problems, they send it to us. We generally have about 1 week to produce a design or give them technical support, send it back, and then the field forces are doing that construction work. Homeland Security, then not only for our own structures that are very important, which are potential terrorist targets, but also providing that support for other agencies. Emergency management is just a huge mission for the Corps of Engineers, and that's what a lot of you probably see us where we've had the involvements, whether it's responses to tornadoes or whether it was the I-40 bridge collapse that we responded to. But most recently has been the support to the Hurricane Katrina's and Rita down the Gulf Coast. And our own Tulsa District has a mission in the 7 parishes in western Louisiana to do the blue roof and the debris removal. And we're about to finish up our part here about June timeframe. Our Civil Works missions generally start from the General Investigations Program, where the nation has a water resource problem. They ask the Corps of Engineers to look at it, find potential alternative solutions. Once a project is authorized for construction, we do the construction, and then if it's a federal project, then we do the operation and maintenance like we do at Lake Eufaula. These are our civil works missions for flood control, hydropower, navigation, water supply, environmental stewardship, recreation. That brings us down to Lake Eufaula, completed in 1964. The purposes that were constructed for flood control, water supply, hydropower, and navigation. And then by the Flood Control Act of 1944, recreation was added as a project purposes at all Corps of Engineers reservoirs. It's one of the largest projects, Corps of Engineers projects in the nation. 600 miles of shoreline, over 105,000 surface acres, fourth largest lake surface acres in the Corps of Engineers. About 1.7 million visitors each year, and then just a significant amount of real estate out grants, shoreline management permits and stuff that we do. I did talk about a little bit about Lake Eufaula to give everybody kind of a frame of reference. Y'all probably seen some of these slides in your previous meetings, but I want to get some of these elevations in your mind. Elevation 585 is the top of the conservation pool, and that's the top of the pool where we try to maintain the lake, and that provides us the storage capacity in times of flood that we can go up to elevation 597. We actually have 12 feet of flood control storage in the lake for downstream flood protection. At conservation pool storage, we have 20 feet of conservation pool storage from 585 to down to elevation 565, and this is really the beneficial use part of the storage. That's the part of the lake that can be used for hydropower, water supply, recreation, other benefits that you have in the lake. That inactive pool below 565 is designed for sediment storage over the course of the years. Again, you look at the conservation pool, it depends on the inflow into the lake, which we've had precious little of. We lose water for evaporation. I think that's about, 6 feet of water a year that we lose for evaporation. Other losses, and of course the spigot there shows the use of the beneficial use of that water for hydropower, water supply, and other water quality releases for downstream. Our goal, the conservation pool, is just as the word said, it's conservation. That's the goal of our operation is to save that water and at the same time use it, for the purposes that the dam was designed and constructed for. We said that water in that conservation pool will not normally be released for any of those other purposes other than certain emergencies than what it was designed and constructed for. Just kind of an interesting chart, and I know that's one that's got a lot of people kind of maybe concerned, but you see that big storage that we showed in there between 585 and 565. 96% of that storage is contracted for hydropower usage, and only the remaining 4% of that is for other water supply purposes. Of that 4%, half of that is contracted out to different users, and the other half, that remaining 2%, is uncontracted at this point and still available for other users that have water rights from the Oklahoma Water Resources Board that come to the Corps of Engineers. Of that 2% that's contracted out, that's this piece of the pie on this side. You can see most of that is for the Kiowa power plant that Karen was talking about, then other smaller amounts for other cities, municipalities, other users. Those are listed on the bottom of the slide, and Karen will have those available for everybody that has a further interest in it. To show you the pool elevations, the green is the top of the conservation pool, 585. You can see on the left side of the screen, up until about the May time frame, we were up above conservation pool, trying to get in that area, from flood control and in that area where we're trying to store a little bit of extra water. And then come about July timeframe is when the drought hit and the water level started the decline that y'all are so painfully aware of. Once it got down to about the 580 level, everybody really tried to start putting the conservation measures in place. And I know Southwestern Power Administration, I don't have their presentation, that they presented that at the listing session, but they have spent millions of dollars of purchasing alternative power sources, alternative fuel sources to reduce the requirement for generation at Lake Eufaula. And as you can see, as a result, over the December, January, February, March timeframe, you probably can't read the dates on those, but these last 4 months on the screen, the Eufaula Lake level has remained fairly constant at about 478.5 feet in that range. With that overview of the lake and the way it was authorized to be managed and what we've been trying to manage in that manner, I want to go to the listening section. We did that about 2 weeks ago. We tried to invite a large cross-section of people to include other federal, state, local governments, marina operators, water contract storage users to try to get input into the ways that people like to see the lake managed. And these are some of the concerns that were brought to our attention. The first one is that, hey, Corps of Engineers, the things have changed in the last 40 years, and although the lake was authorized to be operated in a certain manner 40 years ago, we really need to go back and look at it again and say, hey, is this now, 40 years later, still the way we want the lake to be operated? Or with the increase in recreation and the importance of that to the economy, should we be operating the lake differently now? And our response to that is there is a process to do that. That process has been used at several other lakes, and it's called a reallocation study. And what that reallocation study does is go back and reevaluate those uses of the water and of the storage in the lake and see what other higher benefits are out there and what are the impacts, good and bad, of making changes. We briefed that, and since that time, just 2 weeks ago, Senator Inhofe's office has asked us for additional information on what would it take to do a reallocation study. We've provided that information to Senator Inhofe's office, and we'll see where that goes from here. It was also brought to our attention, just as I said, about the benefits of recreation. They said, hey, this is a multi-million-dollar business around the Lake Eufaula area, and it was mentioned, Susan Savage was on that committee on that National Lake Recreation Demonstration Program that highlighted the importance of recreation. I want to tell you, we also recognize that, but I also want to tell everybody that, although that study was done, the administration's position has been in looking at different project purposes that those other purposes like navigation, flood control, and hydropower have had higher priorities for budgets and appropriation than have recreation and environmental stewardship. We're looking at, we've got really, our budget a year ago, total budget for the district was like $78 million, $77.5 million. This year it's under $60 million. There's things we'd like to do that we can't do, but we also have to recognize that the nation's priorities during the last year have not been on maybe some of the local things that we'd like to see, and regional things like we see with the war on terrorism and all the repair along the Gulf Coast. That's where a lot of the money has been forced to go to. Of course, we support those priorities. But even with that, the budget process that we have does lean to the importance of some of those other business functions. Another concern we had was that the pool fluctuations that Bob was talking about, they adversely impact the fish habitat for the spawning and the surviving of the fish, and they adversely impact the recreation around the lake. And that's something we'll look at long-term, and if a reallocation study is approved and funded. But as an interim solution, what we're committed to do is working with the fisheries people and the recreation people to come up with a seasonal pool plan that hopefully can be used if we get some water in the lake here that can better support the fishery and recreation. We were told that we need to leave the parks open in October for fishing. We normally close the park shortly after Memorial Day. And then people say, hey, there's another good month or two out there that we'd like to see the parks open. What we've committed to do, we'll be starting the preparation of the FY08 budget here in the next couple of months. We will put that into our budget submittal. There's no guarantee that the budget submittal will come back in the president's budget and say, yes, we're going to fund the Corps to keep the parks open for another month. But our commitment is we will at least budget for that. We've heard you, and we're going to budget for it. Concern was that, because of the low lake levels, that a lot of the boat ramps are out of the water. And again, with the budget constraints that we have now, we'd like to do that, and we can't, but we'll also present that in our FY08 budget submittal. We've been told several times that there's hazards out there for the boaters, that there's, because of the low lake levels, there's stumps, there's rocks, there's things out there that are hazards. Our commitment on that is that we can't have a buoy program that we can just go out and mark everything. No, they don't stay there, they disappear, they move, it's expensive. But if there are known hazards that the Oklahoma Lake Patrol brings to our attention to say, hey, there's a hazard out there, we will go mark that location with the buoy. We were told that we need to do away with the ramp fees. Unfortunately, that's not within our authority to do, because there's a national policy that you have to charge use fees, whether it's for ramps or day use or beaches or camping. But so we've got to charge the fees, but we did want to make everybody aware that there is an annual pass that can be purchased for $25 here on the sales thing. For $25 that for the whole year gives you access to all ramps, all beaches, all day use areas at any Corps of Engineers park across the country. I think can you get those from the project office, or they have to get them from you can get those buy those at the project office? We're told that people wouldn't mind increasing the boathouse fees from $6 to $20. We are doing a review of fees. We're supposed to charge reasonable market prices for fees, but I want everybody to know that these fees that we collect for boat docks or for boat launching or for use of the beaches or day use or recreation areas, none of those go back to the project for operation and maintenance. None of them go back to the Corps of Engineers. They all go back to the Treasury. So we do want to charge fair, reasonable fees, but that's not a solution to the funding constraints we have. Told that the billing for marinas and boat houses are over a year behind. That's noted. We are actively working the backlog that we have for billing. I'll spend just a second on the sediment inflow. That was a concern that all the sediments coming into the lake are going to fill up the lake and and thus we won't have this treasure here anymore. This is a good news story. This is not a final report yet, but a sedimentation survey has been done. And when it was designed, the designed or estimated the planned sediment inflow was about 12,640 acre feet per year. That's this line right up here. That's what it was designed for. Down here on the bottom is the actual amount of sediments that we've been getting into Lake Eufaula. The green was the 1969 survey. The brown is what was done in 1977, the survey, and the blue was what was done in the 2004 survey. So the 40-year average from that time is about 4,300 acre feet per year, as compared to the 12,600 acre feet per year that it was designed for. So this is encouraging. I mentioned the inactive pool. That's designed for a 50-year life to fill up in 50 years, and after 40 years, the inactive pool is only 13% full. So that's good. The conservation pool has lost about 11% of its storage in the first 40 years, and it was designed to fill up. These things don't last forever. It was designed to fill up after a period of about 100 years, but at the current rate, it wouldn't fill up for about another 350 years or something like that. So Eufaula's doing well as far as the sedimentation. People expressed difficulty getting information to FOIA from the Freedom of Information Act, of getting information from the Corps. And I want to say that process is under review. We've heard that other places too. We had a concern on formation of Lake Eufaula Advisory Committee. We are eager to embark with the Lake Eufaula area on an advisory committee, as we have at Texoma right now, which is functioning extremely well. And we're working with Save Our Water Lake Eufaula and working with Senator Inhouse's office to try to get legislative language put together that will serve those needs and get us started in the right direction. If you want to boo and hiss for a second, you know, that there's the Save Our Water Lake Eufaula put forth some draft legislation that had the formation of the committee, and then had some certain points below there of moratorium on hydropower and increasing pool levels and mandating some things that would be done, which we felt like were kind of predetermined or preconceived solutions to the lake that need additional study. So when Senator Inhouse's office asked us to review that legislation, we concurred with the first part and deleted all the others. And I don't think that was particularly well done. No. So we met with some of your leaders of the group just this afternoon. I think we're going to talk some more about that maybe a little bit later, as we are getting much closer, I think, in closing the gap and coming together with some legislation that will be useful to you. Communication was said over and over again, and first, you know, it's with our congressional representatives, and I guess Senator Inhouse's office and Senator Coburn's office and Congressman Boring's office have all been so engaged in this and bringing us together to talk. And I thank you all for doing that. The other one was just the communication with the Corps of Engineers, feeling like we're not listening or we're detached and not doing it. So I'll tell you, your new lake manager here, Jeff Knack, will have an open door policy to listen to the public and your concerns. And I don't know how many of you know Jeff. He's only been the lake manager since last fall, I believe, but he worked here previously in his career. Outstanding person that you're lucky to have. And we're also going to start on something else here. We're going to put together 5-year management plans for all of our lakes, and we're going to start right now. And these 5-year management plans are designed to look strategically out and see what do we want to accomplish over the period of time. And if there's issues at the lake that need to be addressed, we want to get those into this management plan that we're going to use as our budget tool. We'll take that 5-year management plan each year. We'll use that for putting together the president's budget request. And we're going to have our stakeholders involved in putting together that management plan so that we're all speaking from singing the same sheet of music. Okay, go to the drought update. Go to this pretty fast. There it is. It's not pretty. Our Lake Eufaula area is here in that dark red, which is the intensity on the left-hand side is called exceptional. This is probably the worst drought we've had since the 50s for this part of the country. Maybe the worst since even the Dust Bowl years. This is the outlook, and you see for the most of Oklahoma, we're in an area that's the drought's predicted to persist or intensify. And you can see that little swath there in the southeastern corner, and you can see that's kind of where the rains have been going, and that area is, maybe some slight improvement, but we've yet to see much improvement. And this final one shows the amount of precipitation required to end a drought of this magnitude in a period of about 2 months, which shows that we'd have to have 18 to 25 inches of rain to really end this drought. So like I said, we did rains last night and we said hooray, hooray. An inch and a half, and I haven't seen how much the pool, you know how much the pool came up? A couple tenths of a foot? Yeah, about 3 inches. And that's about what it was forecast to do. So, that's a start, but it does take a significant amount of rainfall to end the drought. A little bit on the drought. Governor Henry has twice requested federal emergency declaration assistance from Secretary of Agriculture, Federal Secretary of Agriculture, and those have been granted. The last one was granted on March the 8th, rather February 28th, and then on Tuesday of this week, we had a conference call with Oklahoma Secretary of Environment, Miles Tolbert, and the Secretary of Agriculture, Terry Peach, Water Resources Board, Oklahoma Department of Transportation, and some others to determine each of our responsibilities and procedures for what we can do to provide emergency supplies of water. Because once the governor makes an emergency declaration, that kicks in some authorities that the Corps of Engineers has to provide this emergency supply of water from our reservoirs for certain purposes, which are domestic and industrial uses, not for irrigation of crops. But we've been starting to get a number of requests for emergency water, primarily from ranchers whose farm ponds are going dry. So what we can do now is if there is an emergency need for water of less than 1 acre feet or less than about 300,000 gallons of water, you can go to the project office and get an emergency permit for water, over a one-time year or until we say that the drought is over. For larger amounts or longer period of time, then we ask that you contact Jan Hotubby. Telephone number there is listed, and Karen can get it to you. And we're going to be issuing a joint press release with the Water Resources Board and ODOT tomorrow. Last thing, in the interest of conservation, there's several contracted water users who are quickly approaching the limits of what their contracted allocation is, and we started sending letters out about 2 weeks ago urging them to adopt conservation measures and to, if they are going to exceed their permitted usage, they need And if they have additional water rights from the Water Resources Board, then we come back and contract for some more water, or go back to the Water Resources Board for additional water rights. Those are our contacts. That's a kind of a summary of actions over the last, really just the last 2 or 3 weeks, I guess, since we got really engaged with you. As I said when we were open, we want to be part of the team. So, with that, Karen, turn it back to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Joan. As soon as we get our PowerPoint back up here, what we want to do now is just take a very few minutes and summarize where Save Our Water started and bring us quickly right up to the present of where we are with our federal legislation. And then I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Roberts. Those of you who have been with us from the very beginning, you know, we're right in the very beginning, our initial goals, we realized that we needed to propose some federal legislation in our immediate goals for Save Our Water, Lake Eufaula. If you remember back at the Episcopal Church, we said we needed to establish a federal advisory committee, that we wanted to make recreation establish a stated purpose of the lake, and we wanted to raise the water surface level of Lake Eufaula. So in order to try to accomplish those goals, we drafted some federal legislation. And I don't know that we really need to read through all of this. I've summarized it up here on the PowerPoint. We did this way back in the beginning of February. Way too much to read. Basically, I've just summarized it. We looked at what Lake Texoma had done, and we drafted our legislation according to the public law that they had created. If you're a quick reader, you can read that just a second. I'm not going to read it all to you. That's the beginning of the public law. This is actually what we drafted. But in essence, what I just told you is what we put in writing. So we wanted an advisory committee. We wanted recreation stated as a purpose. But then here in the middle of the screen, we started putting in some lake levels. We wanted the level of the lake raised. And we basically wanted hydropower to stay within the levels of 582 and 587. And then if once the lake level went down to 582, we wanted hydropower to stop. So we drafted the legislation and we sent it to Senator Inhofe's office, and we gave the Corps of Engineers a copy. We also wanted the lake level management to abide by sound environment and ecological practices. Somebody will like that one. Right. Well, and we also wanted at the same time the charter for the Federal Advisory Committee to go along with the public law. And so we wrote 5 pages of how this Federal Advisory Committee ought to be put together. We had some ideas about that. All this package went together. Once that happened, we ended up having a meeting at the Board of Education building here in Eufaula. I forget what date that was. If anybody remembers that by memory. Mr. McConkey remembers the date. It was February 2nd. And the date that's up here on the PowerPoint. Okay.
Good test.
Mr. McConkey was there. And Representative Mr. Gross was there from Corps of Engineers. We all talked about that piece of legislation, discussed it, went home, and then the Colonel wrote a piece of legislation as well that Mr. Roberts has already made mention of, that basically what the Colonel had done was take the first paragraph out of the Lake Texoma Advisory Committee and submitted that as the draft, which cut out a lot of the recommendations that we had made. And my smile over here in the chair was, yes, we weren't very happy with that at that point, to say the least. But communications continued, and then what happened today was that there was a call, and we ended up having a meeting at 4 o'clock this afternoon at Expressions Unlimited with a draft of a new piece of legislation that in fact the Corps of Engineers has presented to us. And it's a lot closer to what we want. And I have put, not word for word up here, John, but the summary of it. And I suggested that I would put it up on PowerPoint, but I felt since it was the Corps of Engineers' suggestion, our revised proposal, that Mr. Roberts should come back up to the podium and present to you all what was the end of our discussion this afternoon at 4 o'clock. So I'm going to invite you to come back up and let the folks know what we concluded this afternoon all together.
Okay.
One of the things I do want to tell the group before you start, John, is that in response to our not being happy with the original proposal from the Corps, that the Legislative Committee of Save Our Water did send a letter to Senator Inhofe on the 24th of January, as well as to all of the other legislators, U.S. legislators, letting them know that we weren't happy. And I think that it was important to let you all know that we did that. Okay. I can't find the beginning here.
There you go.
That the beginning of it?
I don't know. Here's your slides.
There we are. There we are.
We're dangerous together.
I know. Okay, I think that's it. Now you just have to figure out which direction to go.
I think I got that figured out. I won't know what's coming next here, but want to go through, like Karen said, we started off with some revised language that we felt like better met the intent of what you want. And then we edited, I got a couple sheets of paper with my scratching on it here for changes that we made.
I'm going to stand here and make sure this right slide.
Okay, but this bill, it puts together the intentions of the purpose of the bill, and that's number one is to establish a Lake Eufaula Advisory Committee. Secondly, specific legislation to establish recreation as an originally intended purpose of Lake Eufaula. And I said. And I talked earlier about the 1944 legislation that does that for all lakes, but what this legislation would do is specifically name it for Lake Eufaula. And then provide for a management plan that addresses the conservation of the conservation pool of Lake Eufaula and putting together a report on how the lake should be managed in the future. So this thing is in 3 sections, the way we currently have it drafted. And I'll tell you, neither Ken nor I or anybody here, except for Blake and Ken and their bosses, that they do the legislation. We provide them our recommendation. It's ultimately their responsibility. But the section 1, establishment of a lake Eufaula Advisory Committee. Section 2, establishment of recreation as a project purpose. And section 3 is the establishment of the conservation pool. We have several provisions of things that we will attempt to do in this management plan. Like I say attempt to do, because some of the things we are within our authorities to do, some of the things may not be in our authorities to do, and we'll have to go back and do some additional things to make that happen, and potentially get the congressional actions to make it happen. But the first thing in the management plan was that we can do right out of the box, even for this next season, if there's water to do it, is to develop an increase in the conservation pool elevation from 585 to 587, using a seasonal pool plan that addresses the most beneficial use, for fishing and the other purposes, and that will require a process of getting all the different people together to see what would be the best seasonal pool plan to meet the needs here. We cannot do that permanently, but we can do that on kind of a yearly, 1 year at a time basis to test different things that might prove for better purposes while we're working on more permanent solutions. And number 2 is addresses the more permanent solution, and that is the preparation of this reallocation study to reallocate storage from what it was originally authorized 40 years ago to other project purposes. We said this reallocation study would address a permanent conservation pool elevation of 587, and it would also address reallocation of conservation pool storage from hydropower to other project purposes, and thirdly, to address the rate of drawdown that you can have in the lake. I think right now it's one, we can lower the pool by our operating plan of 1 foot per week or 3 feet per month. It is what we can do, and the feedback we're getting, of course, is that has bad effects on the shoreline, and we need to address things that are more incremental in nature. The third one is what we attempt to do is once the permanent pool is at 587, to maintain a water surface elevation above elevation 582, provided, however, that hydroelectric power will be generated to help satisfy electric loads when the water surface elevation is above 582. That still gives a hydropower usage. But when the water surface elevation drops to below to 582 or lower, which we got input to again just this afternoon, is an area where we start getting a lot of hazards around the lake and adversely impacting recreation. We'd implement a public information program, and when the water elevation is between 582 and 579, have the requirement for the Corps to notify Southwest Power Administration that hydroelectric power generation should only be made when it's needed for rapid response, short-term peaking purposes as determined by Southwestern. As you go down the pool, it gets more restrictive. So when it's between 579 and 565, like it is now, hydropower generation should only be made to satisfy critical power needs. And we've got a due out to your committee here to identify what critical power or emergency power, if that has an actual definition that goes with it. And the Corps to notify municipal and industrial water supply users that they should implement water conservation measures. Oops, I thought there was one more.
No, I didn't.
Okay. Okay, well when it gets down, I'd have to check, and I can do that. Let me just take a second. It's when that between 579 and 565, below the conservation pool, is that implement water conservation measures designed to lessen the impact of municipal and industrial water supply users. It's got some general provisions in there, and they're not on the slides. The general provisions are, it's recognizing that we cannot violate any law or contracts or any other provisions or leases or any provisions that are made out there, but also having a report due addressing those things that we don't have authority to change, that would go back to the Environment and Public Works Committee in the Senate, and also go to the House for them to address legislatively. So I think that we have tried to capture the goals of conservation pool usage in the report. And what we're going to go back now is go back and I'll present this to my commander. I said, again, we're a military organization. He reviewed what we had, what we brought up here, and I got to go back and take the changes back to him. I want to coordinate this with Southwest Power Administration again. We made a few changes to it. I had their concurrence before when I came this morning with the language that we're using, but I need to take it back to them to look at again, and we'll submit that to the congressional offices for their consideration.
And basically, the changes, when Mr. Roberts says that he had everyone's agreement when he came down here, basically the changes that were made this afternoon is we go back to the point number 1, and we're talking about seasonal changes of raising the water surface level from 585 to 587 on a seasonal basis. What we wanted them to add in there was the provisions to make that on a more permanent basis. We wanted that the second point about going on and making it explicit that they put in to start the request for the reallocation study to make 587 a permanent basis. And we also wanted them to change, they had it in there in the level of the lake at 580. We wanted where it was 580 to raise it to 582. So those are the changes that we requested that they make this afternoon. Okay. What we want to do now is to open up our meeting for our question and answer time. Questions and answers that relate to our program, and you can ask questions of Save Our Water Legislative Committee and also the guests from the Corps of Engineers. But I want to remind you again what our guidelines are during our question and answer period. And for those of you who have not been with us before, I want to go over those guidelines very quickly. And I would ask, Bob, would you? Yep. Well, you may be asked a question. And George, would you help with this? As they're coming for the mics, we have 2 mics. We ask that you go to a microphone that's monitored by Save Our Water members, Bob or George, if you have a question or a comment that you want to make. When you go to the microphone, we ask that you state your name and where you're from. We ask that you tell us who you're directing your question or comment to. If you're making a comment, please limit your comment to no more than 2 minutes. We also ask that you remember our rules of courtesy. Treat all persons with respect. Use courteous language. No loud language. Respect the moderator's request to end your discussion. If you've been to the microphone once, give others a chance to speak before going back a second time. If the Save Our Water monitor our chairperson denies your request to speak a second time or asks for the microphone back, give it back. Okay, we're open up for questions now.
Kathy Brady from Oklahoma City, but we also live here at the lake. This is for John Roberts. If I misunderstood, just correct me. But there's something that on your chart that showed 96.2% of the lake water was for hydropower, correct?
That is correct.
Is that going to Southwestern Water Authority? Who is pulling the water out, number one? Are they paying for it, number two? And if they are paying for it, who are they giving the money to? Because somebody's got to pay for this water.
Okay, the answer is yes, that does go to Southwestern Power Administration. They're the ones that have the contracted for the storage. And yes, they are paying for the contracted storage. And Billy, can you help me with the third part of that as far as the funds that are collected? They all go back to the treasury, is that?
Yeah, they're allowed to use some of those funds.
Yeah, come up here and help me, Billy.
Southwest Power is allowed to use some of the funds that they collect from the people that they sell it to the co-ops out here for maintenance of their lines and maintenance of their facilities. The rest of it is turned back to the general treasury. Recently, we've signed an agreement with the Jonesboro co-op over in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and they're filtering some of that money back to us to help us maintain our generators out here, our turbines and generators. So some of it goes to us for a little bit of maintenance, some goes to Southwest Power, the rest goes back to the general treasury.
This water is in Lake Eufaula in several counties in Oklahoma, and you're telling me that none of the water, none of the money that this water is generating, none of the money is coming back here, nor are they paying for storage of this water, nor is there, are there any taxes being, in other words, this is bad business. This lake is here in Oklahoma, and this money is coming back to Oklahoma. Is that what you are telling me?
They are, I'd like to say it again, they're not paying for the storage. They are paying for the storage. And for that 96% of the storage. They do pay for that. The money does not go back to the state of Oklahoma or to the area. They just said the benefits to we Oklahomans is in our reduced electric bills that we have. Let me explain it the best I can, and then we get Billy to have it. What the power generation is done, you know, when you turn those turbines on at the lake, that's instant power that can be used, and that instant power is used to meet those peak demands. Now, if you got to buy it from the other fuel sources, you know, oil or coal or others, which is more expensive than hydroelectric power, then there will be higher rates for electricity. The electricity goes to a grid. I mean, this grid is over how many state areas? Is over a 7-state area.
We need to give others a chance. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Baxter, and I live at Forum Landing on beautiful Lake Eufaula. Got a question for the Corps. I don't mean to be picking on you tonight, but since you showed up, I do appreciate that. This shows a change. But anyway, I'm kind of got a question concerning hydroelectric generation. I know that was your charter and Southwest Power Authority charter back when the lake was first implemented, and probably a number of other lakes. But I'm kind of curious as to, over the last 40 years, does anybody in the Corps or Southwest Power Authority look at the damage that's caused by reducing the lake levels for possibly unneeded generation of power to lower the lake level, damaging the economy, the environment, the real estate values, the business owners around the lake? Is there anybody that looks at that to take that into consideration?
First of all, I say I don't feel like you're picking on us, you know. We are here to try to answer those questions, and some of it, I don't feel like I'm qualified to answer as far as the generation the Southwest Power Administration does, because what we do is contract the storage for its authorized purpose, which was 8 projects here in Oklahoma that have hydropower generation in there. But you know, that was the project purpose, and that is what that storage has been used for. And like we said, times have changed over the 40 years. We hear you, we know what the concerns are, and that's what we have committed to start addressing through the Lake Eufaula Advisory Committee, and things that we're going to be doing. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer to you than that. But, yeah, but you know, we recognize the impacts, but that was the purpose of the reservoir. You know, recreation was one of those purposes that kind of came on later, and it has grown over the years. Okay, sorry I don't have a better answer for you. Billy, you have a better one to add?
Good enough.
My name's Charles Perry. I live on Lake Eufaula also. Would you tell us exactly who the Southwest Power Administration is? Is it a government agency? Is it a for-profit or a non-profit organization? And who reaps the profits from the Southwest Power Administration?
Okay, the Southwest Power Administration is part of the Department of Energy, so it's a federal agency. What was Mike Deal, D-I-E-H-L, he's the administrator for Southwest Power Administration, a federal employee like myself. What was the other part? Did you catch that? What's the third part of the question?
Is it for profit? Where does the money go?
Yeah. What? Now, I'm going to say, just like the court, we are a nonprofit organization. The DOE, Department of Energy, is a nonprofit organization, so you say they make profits on the water. I don't know if that's
Yeah, I don't know that you necessarily call it profit. I don't know. They have set rates for their power that they sell. How they come up with those rates, I don't know. I do know that generally on an average year, they cover their operating costs, some of ours, a small part of ours, and what they do, any funds they have goes back to the Treasury. So I don't know if they call them profits, I don't know what they call them, but there is some amount of money every year that does go back to the federal Treasury.
I can feel that in a little bit.
and what they pay us, which is a payback for the construction of the dam, that also goes back to the Treasury to repay the cost of building the dam.
They're required by their charter to sell power at cost to basically nonprofit organizations. So they sell to small cities generally and about 100 co-ops. So they have about 100 customers, and those 100 customers claim 7 million end users. Power goes as far away as Illinois in some cases.
Appreciate it, Bob. I tell you, it's going to be difficult to answer some of those questions dealing with another agency, and we probably shouldn't even try it.
My name is Glenn Glover. I'm reside at Longtown here. I have this question for Mr. Roberts. Who is actually in charge of generating the electricity at Lake Eufaula? Is the Southwestern Power does that, or does your people operate the facilities there?
You want to describe that, Billy?
We actually operate and maintain the power generation facilities. We have about 5 people there, 2 electricians, 2 mechanics, and a power plant specialist that do the maintenance on the facilities. We've got power plant operators that sit at the consoles and start them up here at Kerr. And Southwest Power is the entity that calls for the generation. They determine when they need to generate and where. We're part of a 17-lake system, and right now this drought is covering about all 17 lakes. And they're trying to balance the system, so they're calling for power at different lakes. They're the ones that actually decide when and where to generate. We just maintain the facilities when they need some maintenance or things like that.
I have one more question. Just in case this drought does not continues on and we get down to 565, that's the end of the conservation pool. Does that cut off the water to all these municipalities and things like that, or can we continue to draw the water?
You don't want to go here. I think what the limiting, the part of that, it's not what the enacted pool was designed for, and I don't know that I know for certain we've never got to that situation anywhere. But we're not going to deny water if water is available. I think the challenges we're going to have, and the mayor may say, is being able to actually get an intake down that low to be able to draw the water. I think that might cause some challenges to have. But then, I guess just to specifically answer your question, if there's water there, then that water wouldn't be denied. Yeah, Billy talks about the drought that we had in Bartlesville. Was that 2 years ago? Yeah, about 3 or 4 years ago. And actually, they draw their water from Gila Lake, and that lake actually got down to only 17% of the conservation pool left. We've got about 60% of the conservation pool out here at Lake Eufaula, but they got down to 17%, and that's the lowest I've ever seen one. But they had to stop withdrawal at 17% because the water quality got bad. Having trouble treating the water, which is another, I guess, consideration for everybody. But what we did there was to be able to go to an alternative water source over at Copan and allow them to withdraw water from the river, from releases from Copan, to help find them an alternative water supply source, and did some things on cost of the water and stuff to do it. But I mean, our goal is, obviously, if there's water demands, just like the emergency thing we have right now for farmers, is to find a way to keep the supply of water going, primarily, number one, for municipal use.
My name is Harold Foster. My wife and I are retired here on the lake after living here back in the 70s. So we've got kind of a long history with the lake, and we know of a lot of things that have gone on with the Corps of Engineers over the years. However, I'm very respectful of the legislative committee. They are doing a terrific job. I was with them the other day in Oklahoma City. But I've got one comment, that if we allow legislation to go through that gives Southwest Power the authority to go to 579, which is what it is right now, we're wasting our time. That's just my comment. If we want what we've got right now, if you give them the authority to go to where it's not profitable, and I've talked to a lot of people in Arkansas, they're going through similar situations at Bull Shoals and Norfolk. The head pressure reaches a certain point as the lake goes down, and it becomes non-profitable. We're at that level right now. That's the reason they're not generating. It has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with anything else. It is not profitable right now for them to put their turbines through that wear and tear. We should not accept anything below 580, period.
Did you want to comment to that, or is that just a comment?
Comment.
What? Yeah, I don't know about the wear or tear, but it is an advantage to power generation to have higher pool levels, because that's just the principles of the energy for power generation. The more head you have, the more power you can generate with each gallon of water. As that head goes down, you're just less efficient, like you said, to generate power with less head, with less hydraulic head.
Static pressure out there.
Pardon?
Not fluid pressure.
Bob Staggs, I'm from Longtown. Where's the authority to give 96% of the conservation pool to hydropower? The second part, what document can you refer us to that authorize that percentage?
Well, to get the specific authorities and get the documents, I'll have to take that as something I'll have to get to you, because unless someone else can quote those, I certainly can't. But you had those written down on a card there, or just if you'll get with Lori Hunninghake here and capture that, I will get those authorities and documents back to you. Sorry, I don't know the answer. Okay.
I'm Jim Zuckermandel from the Oklahoma City area, but also have property here in Mason Oaks on the lake. Obviously, over the years, technology has changed. When the lake was built 40-some years ago, okay, 64, and designed for power with hydropower. This is probably a question for somebody in the Corps, because you all are the engineers that know this technology. I don't. I'm just a little civilian. But can you give us some idea the efficiency on the hydropower use versus what the Kiowa plant down in McAllister gets out of their power plant? I mean, obviously, the water is generating, is moving the turbines and generating the power, so there's little upfront cost except for our great natural resources versus the other plant. But I'm just trying to understand in today's world, is what's generated out of the hydropower and the water that's dispelled through the dam as efficient or more efficient in cost than the recent plant that's been built there?
I can guarantee you, I cannot answer that question. First of all, the hydropower generation that we get from the dam, like I said, that is hydropower. The Kiowa plant's not hydropower. The Kiowa plant is a gas fueled system. They just use water to cool water or steam or whatever they do to generate power. So I don't know how you would compare the efficiency from a gas-powered plant to a hydropower plant. And again, you talk to the wrong people. We need to get power people in here to answer that. You know the answer?
I've got one example. It just has to do with water. We just learned this last week. The Kiowa plant produces 12, 13 times the amount of electricity that the Eufaula Dam does. The last week of February, the Eufaula generating plant used about 1.5 billion gallons of water. 1 billion. We asked the Kiowa people how long it would take them to use that much water. Now they're buying a lot of gas. They've got a gas line coming in there. They're buying a lot of gas. But as far as water efficiency, it takes them over 3 years to use what the Eufaula Dam used in 1 week. And that was a fairly light week of production in late February. So that's a striking example of the amount of water that hydropower uses.
So I guess in the comparison of the value of water versus the value of gas.
My name's Larry Lenny from California.
Excuse me. We're going to take these two questions, and then I have one other subject that I want to cover, and then we'll be wrapping it up.
What I want to ask is, Crowder East and West privately run now, and if so, on this lake permit, yearly permit, can you unload at Crowder East and West with without having to pay the man there that's privately running, I guess you'd say.
Good question, Mr. Chairman. You don't know the answer, correct?
John, it's leased to City of Crowder.
Okay, so the question is, these both parks are leased to the city of Crowder, but the second part of the question, can you use these permits that we have to do for use for non-core managed parks? And the answer you're shaking your head is no.
Okay, this is Doyle Rose, and I may have to wrestle him for this mic before he gets done. You guys know Doyle. Well, I've dealt with the Corps for 30 years, and I'd like to direct my question to Earl Groves before he sneaks out. Trying to
I'm stretching my leg.
I'd like to say I've dealt with the Corps for 30 years, and I wonder, since I've moved back, there are so many people here that it looks like the Corps of Engineers could use a good PR company to straighten out a few things. You're more or less like a police state. Now, you've got to have a permit to mow. You have to get a permit for everything that you do on this lake. It should be the other way around. Earl, how can you justify 17 trucks, just take it just down to the level of right here at Lake Eufaula, 17 employees, 16 trucks, and still shut down 5 months out of the year? Thanks. Go on, let's have this discussion offline. Seriously, as Billy and John both have said, we're in some tough budget times here with the Corps. We also have a crew of maintenance people, 4 or 5 maintenance people, a couple environmental specialists and rangers. We have in the last several years cut and cut and cut. You all are the recipients of those cuts. You all have seen those. As John has pointed out, we continue to do efficiency studies on our staff, how we run our parks, trying to keep what we can open and what we're doing. Trying to keep it going has been very, very tough. I've done this 30 years too. A lot of you know me. I've been the manager here at Eufaula. I've, been here watching things and working things here since 1977 also. Wish we had some better answers, but most of my answers are the same. We're working on it, and I mean that seriously too.
We have gone through a lot. What we feel like is painful cost-cutting measures. I might feel like those compared to a lot of things that y'all go through, it's not painful enough. In the 10 years since I've been the deputy district engineer, we've gone from 1,250 employees to 650 employees. Just 3 years ago, we did a voluntary separation and reduction in force that cut 100 people out of our personnel charging to O&M budgets. As we did that, we not only saved from those salaries, but we paid less rent. We got rid of part of our vehicle fleet. We did the other things to try to do it. Our operation and maintenance budget has been essentially flat for the last 12 years, about the same level of funding. And if any of y'all live on fixed incomes, you know what the impacts of inflation does to your buying power in that. So we have continued to try to provide the same level of services for the parks without closing the parks and keeping them open for the same amount of time, with less buying power. And I'm sure that you can go and find more examples of things that where we can still cut some more. But I want to tell you, we have been trying to be good financial stewards and live within the budgets that we do have.
I want to thank the representatives from the Tulsa District Office and Mr. Bentley for coming tonight and being willing to not only present information to us, but to be willing to field our questions. just in summary, I hope that some of what you'll take with you this evening is to realize, once again, even though I'm being repetitious, to remember the progress that we are making and that we've made in 4 months. We are going to have a voice on this lake, more so than we've ever had before. There's no doubt in my mind, and I think also I'm speaking for the legislative committee, we will have a voice on the state level through a Citizens Lake Committee. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to have a federal advisory committee at the federal level. And that's a voice that we haven't had before on both the state and federal level. I think we're going to see recreation in writing as a stated purpose of this lake. And I believe we're working very hard at lake management levels. And we're going to keep on working for those, to get them at a level to stop the destruction and devastation of this lake. Save Our Water, Lake Eufaula Citizens Group is here to stay. We wouldn't have done what we did yesterday to incorporate. We're here for the long haul. We hope you're here for the long haul. We need your help. We need your support. There's some things coming up that I want you to consider. We're going to add another dimension to Save Our Water. In between the monthly meetings, we're going to start another kind of training. On the 23rd of this month, we'll start a training at the library in the conference room. I'm trying to remember what time I scheduled it for. 7 o'clock, I believe.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a good time. Thursday, the 23rd. The name of this program is called Doing Active Democracy. Doing Active Democracy is training citizens to do just that, active democracy. You'll be trained to be lobbyists, to be peacekeepers and monitors in case we want to do something publicly at some time in the future. We might want to stand outside and be visible somewhere, do something publicly. Doing active democracy. We would like to see this group be as large as 30 people. When I look out amongst this crowd, it looks like a crowd that is very familiar with the 60s and the Civil Rights Movement. Some of you take offense to that, Sonny. I include myself.
I was just thinking about Woodstock.
I will be doing the training. If you're interested in being a part of this select group of 30 people and want to be trained to be a part of the Doing Active Democracy group and being leaders in that group within Save Our Water, Lake Eufaula, then show up at the library on the 23rd of March and start being trained as peacekeepers and monitors. Okay? You want to learn more about it, you have questions, call me. That telephone number in the brochure will reach me, 452-384. In the meantime, we still need volunteers to do all kinds of projects. Call Karen Sminner. Some of us are going to the Oklahoma Water Resources Board meeting next Tuesday. Come go with us. If you have friends you know have lake places here in Oklahoma City, call them, tell them to meet us there. It's at 9:30 next Tuesday morning at 3800 North Classen Boulevard. We need to have a presence at the monthly legislative forums for Mahosh County. The next one is March 17th, meeting at the Bell Star Grill at Highway 69 and 150. I've already told you that our next Save Our Water meeting will be April 13th here with Secretary of State and Secretary of the Environment. Please, before you leave, give us your email address. Once again, you've been a great audience.